mayor at that time of Rancho Palos Verdes was able to talk to him. Donald J. Trump waved his hand and it did not stop their landslide.
And he put a tariff on it, didn't he?
If any tariff works, that will work. So I want to say thank you, John, because I live in that neighborhood, and I don't like to go slip sliding away. And the thing is, you proved yourself there to be top political material for us, and I'm rooting for you, running for candidacy with Rancho Palos Verdes as a councilman, and eventually higher office, and I'll let him speak that as well. But I'd like to introduce you right now to a gentleman I found to be a great deal of fun, a great deal of energy, a great deal of information that I've appreciated over the years, Mr. John Cruikshank. We'll be introducing our featured speaker, Sheriff Villanueva.
Thank you. Well, first of all, let's hear it for Scott again. Good news, I'm not here to talk about the landslide. I was on the city council for 2 terms, 2017 to 2024, and twice I was mayor in the great city of Rancho Palos Verdes. And both times I was mayor, we had obviously some very major things. The first time was in 2020. And at that time, I ended up being one of the first elected officials to get COVID at Trump National, of all places. So, and we all know what we dealt with in 2020. And Mark was talking about that with his family, but I think that changed a lot of us. And then in 2024, I was mayor again, and then we had a lot of rain the year before, and then in 2024, we had to declare a state of emergency, and kind of all the rest was history. But sometimes it does take, when you're an elected official, to actually do things that are hard and do things that are necessary. And so I was fortunate. The good thing is I actually am a civil engineer by trade. I run my own company. I've run my own company since 1996, so it's 30 years in business. It just seems like yesterday, but you guys all know how time flies in the world. You know, one day you're starting a business, and 30 years later, you're still in a business. And we've got to keep working, all of us, because we've got to pay our taxes. So, anyhow, I know it seems like all of us that continue working, and we see so many other people that are working, and you wonder, all this fraud and all these things were going on at this point, our lives would be so much better and our taxes would be so much lower if we could just have government officials actually enforce the law and do the things that are necessary to stop all the fraud, and actually, let's build some more jails and put some more people in them. I know that, right?
Including elected officials.
I know the other side always talks about having less jail and not supporting the police, and that's just absolute madness to me. So I want to thank the Torrance Lameda Palos Verdes Republican Assembly. I always say that Palos Verdes should start first, but nobody's listening to me. I think there's more people that live in Torrance, so unfortunately I'm in a minority situation there as well. And I also appreciate all your leadership and commitment to conservative values. Actually, when I started on the Rancho Palos Verdes City Council, it was always a majority of Republican elected leaders. And if you look at the current Rancho Palos Verdes City Council, there's 2 Republicans, there's 1 no party preference, there's 1 Trump Democrat, and then of course there's a very hardcore Democrat running for state assembly. Jessica can tell you all about Paul. And the 2 members that are actually term limited out are the 2 Republicans. And so I believe that Paul Seo will probably, as a Democratic candidate, make it through the primary. I think he raised close to $650,000 so far. You know where most of that money comes from. And yes, we all know where that money comes from. And unfortunately, that money is used against us. And so because he probably will not be running for city council, there'll be 3 open seats in Rancho Palos Verdes that's the reason that I stepped forward and said I'm going to run again. I would like to see there be a Republican majority again on the Rancho Palos Verdes City Council. I'm trying to convince my friend Jerry DeHovic, so if any of you are friends with Jerry, keep putting pressure on Jerry to run. He's a great, strong conservative. And then there'll be a third seat. And I always tell people that if you know anyone out there that fits the bill of running for that position, let me know. It would be great to have a majority of like-minded people and be able to run the city continually as a conservative city. I'm also a member of the Los Angeles County Taxpayers Association. If you haven't heard of that organization, we're kind of I would say, an arm of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association. And so our idea is to protect the taxpayer. When I had a radio show when I was running for supervisor and where I met our sheriff at the time, actually was in running for 4th District Supervisor, our Sheriff Alex Villanueva. During that time, I went to KBC. How many people listen to AM 790 KBC? Hopefully most of you at least listen to John Phillips or some of those good shows. But when I went there, the sole purpose of that radio station is not about making money. The sole purpose of that radio station is to protect the taxpayer and be the voice of the taxpayer. And I never heard anything like that before. So to me, that meant a lot. And so that's why I had a radio show there for about 10 months. It's great. And so at that point, I met people that are on the LA County Taxpayer Association. So if you're interested, la-tax.org, go to that and check it out. So why does local leadership matter so much? You always hear about local control and that. And on the Palos Verdes Peninsula, if you don't know, there's 4 cities on the Palos Verdes Peninsula that like to always work together, but you have Palos Verdes Estates, Rolling Hills Estates, and Rancho Palos Verdes. And Rancho Palos Verdes is the largest, but also the newest. We've only been a city since 1973. And the whole reason for forming a city was that we wanted local control. They started building large, big box apartment buildings on the coast, and the people that were in the unincorporated part of LA County said we can't have that happen. So local control has always been important to us. And so we might all differ in terms of our political values on these councils, and it is nonpartisan issues, but of course most of those are either D's or R's. We all agree on one thing, and that's safety, and making sure that we have not only safe neighborhoods, but strong communities and a strong police force and a strong sheriff. And so for me, so you all know that local people, local politicians, they do affect your lives more directly than any of the federal candidates, even the president. Of course, the decisions impact your taxes, your roads, all those things, and your quality of life. And on the peninsula, there's 2 police forces. Of course, we have the Sheriff's Department that protects 3 of the cities, and Palos Verdes Estates has its own police force. And they're led by Chief Luke Halinka. Currently, and unfortunately, we're led by Sheriff Robert Luna, which is unfortunate because there's things that go on in our city that hadn't happened before. Of course, the sheriff will come and talk about what he's going to do to change it, but what we've seen is things being run by DEI, and the people that are being promoted up the ranks are not necessarily the most qualified, but they're being promoted based on their gender and their skin color, which is insanity. And especially when you have something like law enforcement that's so important, so critical to have the right people. And they represent about 25% of our city budgets, these police forces and the sheriffs. And so it's a significant taxpayer investment. And so a lot of the things I talk about, I do tie back to taxpayers, because these are all of us that are working our asses off every day, frankly. And you keep seeing our taxes get raised more and more and more. And what happens is you have a lot of people that don't own property, and they're voting on property taxes. Think how wrong that is. I mean, it's just so inherently unfair, but that's what happens. And so many people don't even understand that every time that they raise our taxes, it causes all the problems we have, like the housing problems and the high costs of living. And that comes from all the things that we vote on, but there's no nexus. People don't understand that. Why does this sheriff race matter so much to our cities? I mean, our sheriff directly affects all these contract cities, because our city pays close to $10 million a year for the sheriff protection. which is a huge number. We have about a $42 million budget in our city, and only about 100 staff. But a big portion of what we pay for is the contract with the Sheriff's Department. And what's crazy is that we've actually had our city manager, when he's asked for crime reports lately, he's been told by the local Alameda Sheriff Captain, well, for you to get that information, now you're going to have to file the Public Records Act to get that. Imagine that. Like our city manager, we pay him $10 million. We're literally their clients. We pay for their services, and we're being told that we have to file a Public Records Act to get crime statistics. And every time that I heard that crime statistics were going down, I knew, and we all knew, that this wasn't really the real thing. What happens is, if you make less arrests, you're going to have less crime on paper. It's going to show it on a graph. Look, less homicides, less robberies, less this, less that. Well, you're not making arrests, so you're not getting those statistics anymore, and people are not being charged. So I always knew that it's BS, and so as a local official, I found I have a better opportunity to push back on some of the BS that we hear from some of these bureaucrats. So we have to demand that law enforcement do their work without this whole waste, without politics, and without ideology, really. Taxpayers deserve a sheriff who respects the law and actually respects their deputies and respects the taxpayers and just does their job. One of the things I heard about the current sheriff is that, how many people here are apartment owners, or maybe there's not any here, but I correspond a lot with the AOA, which is the Apartment Owners of America, huge group. And these are many people that just work their entire lives to then buy 4-unit apartments as an investment to have, so that when they retire, they have something coming in. It takes them forever to get these eviction notices of people that are deadbeats and aren't paying. And really what the sheriff should be doing is, once they're told to have a court order of people to be pulled from there and be evicted from those buildings, the current sheriff is taking months to do that. And because that direction comes from the Board of Supervisors, and unfortunately we don't have a sheriff right now that's doing the right thing for the people that they represent. It becomes political, and you see how when you have people that are in these offices that are so important, and they have politics above policy, you have this huge disconnect, and that's why we have so many people treated so poorly in LA County right now. For me, I'm very proud to be endorsing the next sheriff, Alex Villanueva. And the reason that is because when we were campaigning together, I realized that he's a really great listener. Like he concentrates a lot on what I was saying in my speeches, and I of course would listen to him intently too, because he always had great stories, as you're going to find out. But I found that he truly believes in that job. Like I don't think he wants to do these jobs just because he likes it. He's driven down to the South Bay 3 or 4 times over the last month alone, and he lives all the way in the far north. And he knows that law enforcement's affecting what's going on here right now. But he's always seems to be a leader who puts law enforcement above politics. And I think that's hugely important. Some of his things he's done, he has a proven track record. He reinstated wrongfully terminated deputies, and he actually saved the taxpayers millions in recruiting and training costs by doing that. He opened up the sheriff's budget to public scrutiny, and all public budgets should be open to public scrutiny. That's our money. Why they're not open and why they're secret is nuts. He's refused to defund the police, which we all know how crazy that was, and keeping resources where they belong. And he actually took real action on homeless encampments when it wasn't popular to do so. Right? And then one thing that is really close to my heart is fighting this vaccine mandates that were out there that would have crippled our staff. So that was, it took a lot of courage. So why is Alex Villanueva the right choice? First of all, he's a constitutional sheriff who understands the limit of government. He supports his deputies, which is hugely important. He protects the taxpayers, and finally, he respects us as contract cities and local cities. He respects us, which he understands that we're actually his client, and he understands that we're the ones paying their bills. And so in closing, I want to encourage you to learn more about him. I think you're going to find him very engaging. I've heard him speak many times, and I love hearing his stories because they're always stories about doing something. Like, he didn't just sit and do nothing. Like, he saw problems and he had the courage to actually go out and fix these problems. And I don't care what party you're in. Really what matters is we have to have people in these offices that are going to do what we expect them to do, and that's what he does. So please join me in welcoming Alex Villanueva.